Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk about a really important interview that I caught here on YouTube between Andrew Huberman and Dr. Justin Sonnenburg. Now, this interview was over 2.5 hours long. It took me 2 days to get through all of it. And I was taking notes like crazy because Dr. Justin Sonnenburg was on a study that talked about how changing the microbiome impacts or modulates the immune system. And as you know, if you're a chronic illness sufferer like I am, you know that Western medicine has failed us. And there's nothing that Western medicine can do to help with all of the low levels and the high levels of chronic inflammation. And all of that leading and setting us up to so many different chronic illnesses. I thought this interview was extremely important for many reasons. So I took notes, I digested the parts of it that meant the most to me and how I could use it to change my diet or change my current plan. As you guys know, I'm on a wellness journey. I change my diet all of the time. I try many different types of supplements, and I talk about it here on my channel. Now, this interview between Andrew Huberman and Dr. Justin Sonnenburg was absolutely one of the first studies that I have heard about that actually talks about correlating the changes of the microbiome with the actual immune system and how does it modulate it. So Dr. Justin Sonnenburg wanted to test dietary changes and how it impacted the microbiome. So in science, we don't even know what a healthy microbiome looks like. They're not sure at this point. What does a healthy one look like? Is it more diverse? Is it less diverse? They're trying to figure these answers out, and figuring out some of this will help with chronic illnesses and the inflammation that we're constantly dealing with. And Dr. Justin Sonnenburg was wondering, is it our lifestyle, where we're living, what we're eating, what we're doing, impacting the microbiome for generations. And it's setting us up now for chronic illnesses. And that's what he's trying to figure out so that he can get in front of some of these chronic illnesses that are driven by inflammation. He knows, and we know, Western medicine has been failing us for a very long time. And he's asking some very specific microbiome questions. And in the study, they were actually able to document and test hundreds of thousands of different parameters and facets of the immune system as they were changing the microbiome with two very specific diets or dietary changes. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. So this study, it was mind-blowing to me because this is the type of studies that we need to start happening that will impact our health the most. These are the answers that I've really been looking for. And I was really encouraged to not only hear that Dr. Justin Sonnenburg was seeking some of these answers, but they're started a study. They have an entire staff to start looking into probiotics, prebiotics, to start looking into the microbiome and doing very specific studies to the answers that I've been dying to know for years as I'm trying to biohack my way back to better health. So the microbiome, Dr. Justin Sonnenburg had a really good definition because we're always talking about the gut biome, the gut microbiome. We have all these different names for it, the microbial community. And we were talking, and he was talking about what is that exactly? And we have microbes all over our skin, in our mouths, in our nose, in our guts, in the colon. There's microbes, and there's probably microbes they don't even know about yet, all over our body, in different areas of our body that help us through day to day and with our health. They're constantly working and talking. There's an entire microbe community. And he said that they were so vast and so dense that we would be astounded at the actual numbers. And the most of the gut microbial community is within the colon that most of us refer to or talk to when we say the gut biome and different terms like that. So that is where most of our gut biome is concentrated. However, we have microbes throughout our skin, in our nose, in our mouth, and more areas than we can think of. And the microbe community changes all the time with things we don't even realize. Like if we own a pet, do you own a cat or a dog or a bird, or the people that we're meeting day to day? All of these thousands of things, changes that we don't even think about, change our microbe community all the time. And we don't even realize it, think about it, or talk about it. But Dr. Justin Sonnenburg is most interested in how dietary changes change the microbe community, or the gut microbe community that we have within the colon, and how that correlates to the immune system, or how does that modulate the immune system. So he did a very specific study, and he took 2 different types of dietary changes. So what came out in the interview was very interesting, as he didn't completely change the group's diets. He actually just added to the diets instead of completely changing one type of diet to another type of diet. And he had 2 different groups. There was a group of that had more fiber in their diet. They didn't change their entire diet, but they were asked to add fiber to their diet. And it was plant-based fiber. And they ended up adding 40 grams or more of fiber to their diet. So the second group was a fermented foods group, where they added all kinds of fermented foods to the actual diet that they already had. Now, the study went over a course of 17 weeks, and both groups ramped up their diets slowly, because if you've ever tried to up your fiber intake or up your fermented food intake, you know that those types of changes need to happen slowly, and you ramp up as you go. You don't just all of a sudden have 10 servings of fermented foods, or you're going to pay the price, if you know what I mean. So within those 2 groups, and by the way, this was a human-based study, which he was very adamant about, because when we have the animal studies or the rat studies, it doesn't always correlate into humans exactly the way that it does into rats. So humans was a very important part of the studies. And he had the 2 groups that changed their diets. One had fiber, one had fermented foods. Now, the study lasted over 17 weeks, and you would ramp it up. The group that had fiber ramped up over 40 grams of fiber. The group that had fermented foods ended up having about 6 servings a day of fermented foods. Now, fermented foods consisted of sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, and different types. And he did notate that fermented foods had to be from the refrigerated section, because the fermented foods, or the fermented foods that we talk about in the canned section, or the warm sections of the grocery store, are no longer living. They no longer have living probiotics. They have been through a process that kills everything that's living. So he said it's very important to realize the fermented foods came from the cold section of the store, and then it had to be refrigerated and remain refrigerated. The high fiber foods came from legumes, beans, vegetables, and it was all plant-based. And the participants in the study more than doubled their current fiber intake to participate in the study and ramp their fiber up. Now, the study was extremely interesting, because Dr. Justin Sonnenburg and I were thinking that the high fiber food groups would win the study. We would see the biggest and best changes, and that's actually not what happened. What happened is the people who had the high fiber diets, the people that saw the best changes with adding more fiber, were there people who had already a diverse microbial community in their guts. And the people who had a not large divisive, had a large density group, the people who had a smaller group with less different types of species didn't see the improvements that they thought they would see. They didn't grow the group in diversity. And he's speculating at this point that some of us have lost some of that diversity and have also lost parts of the diversity that help us even digest the fiber. And that was extremely important to notate. But the fermented foods group actually did see the largest improvement. They saw the largest change within the microbiome. And they also saw that it positively affected the immune system with the largest signal between the two groups. So the first group was the fiber, adding fiber to the diet. And that's where they suspected they would see the largest change and help within chronic illnesses and getting inflammation to actually lower. But that's not really what happened. It was the fermented foods group that actually signaled, had the loudest signal of the change. And it was people that didn't have, it was people kind of across the board. It didn't matter how diverse their community was. So it was actually that fermented foods group. And remember, they ended up in the end adding 6 servings of fermented foods to their typical daily diet. And they were doing a ton of testing across the board on the immune system. They were tracking thousands of different facets to the immune system. And they actually saw a couple of hundred different inflammatory markers get better and decrease inflammation. That's how significant of a change that it was within the study. Now, the study didn't go the way that I thought, and I was actually just getting ready to change my diet to add in more plant-based foods, which I'm still thinking about. But because of this study, I now know that I need to experiment with a lot more fermented foods. I don't typically have fermented foods in my diet. I do like sauerkraut. I do like yogurt and some of the fermented foods, but I don't typically have it in my diet every single day. And I for sure have never had 6 servings of a fermented food every single day to see how it would impact my health. So I do plan on starting to experiment with fermented foods to see how it impacts me. Can I gain anything from it in this wellness journey or not? But the study was so incredibly interesting to me and amazing because someone's actually looking at what we need them to look at to help us along this crazy journey that we're on with such high levels of inflammation, dealing with chronic illnesses. And 2, it reconfirmed that I need to add the fermented foods to my diet, and adding a ton of fiber to my diet may not be the best route. It did not grow the diversity of the gut microbiome, which is what I'm interested in doing. Is how do we grow that diversity? Or is it even possible? Maybe it's not possible at this point. Maybe my diversity at this point is so damaged that I can't grow it larger. I don't know. Science is still out on all of this, but the fermented foods group had hundreds of inflammatory markers that went down. That is enough for me. And this is just one study. That is enough for me to try it. It doesn't hurt me to try to eat more sauerkraut in a day, or to get fermented pickles, or whatever type of fermented food I want to try to see what happens. And what I want to do is try it for the 17 weeks, ramp up like they did, shoot for 6 servings a day, and then see what happens to me personally. Do I sleep better, or do I have less inflammation, or do my knees not hurt? I mean, there's a million questions that I have, and the study was significant enough that I'm willing to try it. So what if you have to eat a few servings of sauerkraut? I'll figure it out. But the interesting part was the high fiber group didn't react the way that I thought that they would. I thought that the microbiome would increase in diversity and the immune system would be doing better, and we would just all run out and eat more plant-based fiber and all of us would be healthy, and that's just kind of how it would go. But that's just not the route that the study took. And now they've got my attention. I'm extremely interested. I'm going to be checking back to see what other studies they are doing. What are they testing? And then what are they finding? I know that another study that they're looking at is comparing the ketogenic diet to the Mediterranean diet. And I also find that to be really fascinating because a lot of us alter our diet a lot to try to live a healthier life and to biohack our illnesses. And they're doing the studies that we need them to do because they're looking at it to see how does it impact the actual immune system. So we know our immune system. Science knows that our immune system is driving the inflammation that we have now with chronic illnesses. It's driving it. How do we change the immune system? How do we affect the immune system in a positive way so that we become healthier and not as sick as we are today? And that's the type of questions that they are asking. The immune system is driven by the microbiome. So the microbiome, the microbes, drive the immune system. So how do we need to change our gut microbiome for a healthier immune system? And that's what I'm trying to learn more about. And I just find it fascinating because honestly, I've been sick most of my life. And everyone always says, oh, wait until science figures it out. But honestly, I don't have that kind of time. I'm fighting a clock here to be able to walk well, to be able to vacation with my family, to live a very decent, healthy, well life. I'm fighting against the clock and I'm fighting against inflammation. And we all know Western medicine just has failed us with chronic illnesses. And so it's studies like this that I find amazing and I spend most of my time on. I'll be bringing you more of these studies. And the reason why is because this particular interview was over 2.5 hours long. It took me 2 days to get through and I had to take a lot of notes and re-listen to a few parts to make sure I got it correct. If you just take a look at this particular study in the news or what the media published about it, you will miss the entire concept of the study and you will miss what the findings actually were. Depending on what news media outlet you read, they reported the findings of the study completely different amongst themselves. Believe it or not, they have stake in this matter. They want to push us one way or the other for particular biased reasons. They really don't take a look at the study and determine what the study found or what happened during the study. So to actually catch an interview with one of the main doctor participants that ran the study, had the idea of the study, was amazing to me. And I hope to catch more from Dr. Justin Sonnenburg. And I hope that this helped you in some way to know that changing your diet does change our gut biome. Now, does it change it for the better or for the worse? The verdict is still out on a lot of the different diets or a lot of the changes that we've been doing. Even though some of the changes that I've done and talked about here on YouTube may not have been the best for my gut biome. And it's just a lot of trying and trying again to see what actually works for us. So that's all that I have for now. This interview was amazing. I will link to it in the description in case you want to catch the entire thing, because what I found fascinating, you might find something else fascinating or more important to you along on this wellness journey. So I want you to seek out the study, to actually read it, to actually understand it, and stop relying on some of these media outlets to read the results to us and tell us how to eat and what to do. And I will see you guys in the next video.